We're stationed at the IEC still, where results are coming in and things are looking a little bit closer to realizing what it is that South Africans have decided to do at the polls. But particularly in this session, we're going to talk about the Johannesburg trends, and of course I'm joined by our analyst Lawson Knight, who's going to give us a clearer picture of what happened yesterday. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so Johannesburg is a particularly interesting situation at the moment. No real majority, you say. What are we seeing in this election?
Well, what we're seeing on the basis of the results that have been declared so far in Joburg, as well as the extrapolations based on those results, we can begin to see a pattern that is emerging. And what it's showing us is that no party is going to get a majority in the city of Johannesburg. So the need for a coalition will come into play. But what we're seeing at the moment is that the ANC is in the lead, with the DA running second. On these figures, we have the ANC, these are extrapolated figures, not real figures now, showing that the ANC will end up with around 44% of the vote, the DA at around 38%, and with the EFF potentially holding the balance with about 10%. And I think that's quite a shift from what we saw in 2011, when the ANC had over 58% of the vote and the DA 34%. So that 14% that the ANC has lost seems to have gone by about 10% to the EFF and 4% to the DA.
Yeah, I mean, that's super interesting. I mean, it's a very different dynamic from obviously what we've seen before. And I mean, it was mentioned that, these elections are going to be a very tight one. But can you talk to us also about the turnout? I would imagine that that's also contributed to what it is that we're seeing in these numbers.
That's played a significant role in the way that these numbers have materialized. So what the DA's gain, for example, has been on the basis that they have been very strong in the suburbs, in the suburbs of Joburg, where the turnout has been over 68%. Big turnouts in those solid DA supporting wards, which has boosted obviously the DA's figures for Joburg. In the townships in the south of Johannesburg, in Soweto, and in Orange Farm, we see the ANC losing support, but not as much as it did in some of the other townships. So the ANC support it seems to be holding relatively firm, even though they have dropped support. It's an older constituency, Soweto, a much older township, where people's allegiance to the ANC is much more deeply entrenched and rooted. So we're seeing the stickability of the ANC there. If one then starts to look at the suburbs to the north of Johannesburg, in Diepsloot and Alex in particular, we see ANC losing much more support there, perhaps more of certainly a newer township in terms of Diepsloot, obviously not Alex, and ANC losing much more support there, and the DA gaining support in those areas, which are much more fluid a voter profile there is emerging. And what is significant also is the lower turnouts both in the townships in Soweto as well as in Diepsloot and Alex. In Soweto, the turnout is down to about 54%, as opposed to 68% in the suburbs, and in Diepsloot and Alex down to 48%. So in those traditional strong ANC voting areas, people have largely stayed away, and that has really contributed towards the ANC losing the support that it has.
Now, I mean, obviously this would be pure speculation. Do you think these kind of stayaways are purely based on kind of weather conditions? I mean, yesterday was a bit of a troublesome day for people to get around, or is it a service delivery issue that you would imagine?
Well, I think that some voters have made a deliberate attempt. The fact that we've seen very high turnouts in some areas and lower turnouts in others means that I don't think objective factors like the weather have played such a big role. Sure. So I think it's more been a deliberate issue that the DA have gone out of their way to make sure that their supporters got to the polls. The ANC has done less well in convincing its traditional supporters to do that. People have obviously stayed away in large numbers who would traditionally have voted ANC, and those that have gone to the polls, we've seen a little shift in favour of the DA and a bigger shift in favour of the EFF. So I think those are the lessons that the ANC needs to take home for the issues that the ANC needs to focus on, is how it's lost that support and what it needs to do to get back the traditional support that it has always relied upon.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Nadi, for giving us insight. As you know, you need to go onto News 24 to find out any more about what's going on in the polls. But of course, stay logged in and let us know what you guys think.